Morning you guys, it's Karen and we're here to talk nanotechnology. I had a request to make a video talking about how you can find sunscreens without nanoparticles in it. So I thought I would do a video talking about what nanotechnology is, what the evidence is, what the concerns are, and how you can find sunscreens without nanoparticles in them. So I'm talking about skincare in general, but mostly sunscreens, because mineral sunscreens, i.e. zinc and titanium dioxide, is where the majority of the research and the concerns are. These are really exciting videos for me to research actually, because I feel like I've still got my finger in medical research, if you like, because my knowledge, I start off with a basic knowledge of nanoparticles. So my knowledge comes from particularly a gold nanoparticle study we had in the hospital, and it was about how it's a potential for targeted cancer therapy. So really exciting. But I have researched here what the evidence is in relation to skincare and zinc oxide, titanium dioxide, and so this will inform the way that I buy sunscreens going forward. So what is nanotechnology? It is the technology to make anything into tiny particles, nanoparticles. They're not even visible to the naked eye, they're that small. And nanotechnology applies to everything. It's in our food, in cosmetics, in toothpaste. It applies to the medical industry, to the manufacturing industry, to the clothing industry, to every area of our lives. Nanotechnology can be applied in some way. And it is both exciting and also has its dangers. And so it's something that is known in some circumstances to be toxic and known in some circumstances to be extremely beneficial. So like I said, we did a study on gold nanoparticles and how they could be used as a targeted therapy for cancer. And that's still being researched now. I think that was when I started in radiology, I saw that study, so probably about 8 years ago, something like that. There's also technology that can take plastic bags, so carrier bags, which we all know is a problem, and use nanotechnology to recycle them into a strong material, carbon nanotubes, which can be used in things like tennis rackets, baseball bats, etc. So what are the concerns? Well, nanoparticles have been shown that they can, in some circumstances, get into our cells. They can get into our bloodstream and they can cross the blood-brain barrier, which in some circumstances is a good thing. But when they get into the cells, they change the way they act and they stick to cells and can cause damage. And so in the area of skincare, a lot of research has been done to find out if using something topically like zinc or titanium dioxide in a sunscreen does actually penetrate the skin, and does it actually get in and cause damage. It's so ironic because nanoparticles can potentially cure cancer, nanoparticles can potentially cause cancer. So of course, you know me, the question I have is, well, what's the evidence? And as I said, my starting point was with a little bit of knowledge, and I knew that companies were saying that the research shows that zinc oxide and titanium dioxide does not penetrate the skin. It stays in the stratum corneum, and so there is no danger because these particles do not enter the bloodstream, they do not enter the cells. On looking at it further, there definitely is research that confirms that. So it confirms that in many different studies, in animal studies, in human in vitro studies, i.e. in a lab, in human in vivo studies, it has shown that the zinc dioxide and titanium dioxide does not penetrate the skin. So companies that are using nanoparticles, you will find, quote this research and say that the current research shows it doesn't penetrate the skin, therefore there is no concern. However, there is a lot of other research, and I'll try to cherry pick some of the research to link for you, but there's a huge amount of research out there, many different studies that can really confuse things, because there is 2 studies, for example, that are on pigs and mice. One study shows, you'll read it and you're like, oh, okay, this is showing that nanoparticles do penetrate the skin. You'll read the other study and it says, oh, this is showing that nanoparticles don't penetrate the skin. But then when you look further into it, this study is not about minerals. It's not about zinc and titanium dioxide. So I'll try to link some for you. But the other research shows that, firstly, inhalation of nanoparticles is dangerous. So what you don't want to be doing is inhaling any type of nanoparticle, including zinc and titanium dioxide. The other thing to note is that when a study concludes that it doesn't penetrate skin, they themselves in the research have pointed out that they have only tested this on a short-term basis. So they have looked at application of a zinc and titanium product and then looked to see if there's any presence of it in the cells in, say, 24 to 48 hours. They have said themselves, we need to look at 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years and see if then any has penetrated, because other studies on nanoparticles, not necessarily on skincare or on sunscreens, but other studies on nanoparticles have shown that long term more of the nanoparticles are found in the cells and in the lower levels of the skin. Another thing that's confirmed in the research is that they have not looked at the biochemical processes of the skin and how nanoparticles affects that. They're only currently looking, does it penetrate the skin? So there's another area of research that needs to be done for all skincare with nanoparticles in it. There are 1 or 2 studies on compromised skin, so skin with eczema and dermatitis, showing that it doesn't make any difference, that it still doesn't penetrate through. But again, they are confirming that tests need to be done on sunburnt skin, that no tests have been done in that area at all. And bear in mind, you can have sunburnt skin without knowing. The final thing the research confirms is that they don't know the impact of nanoparticles on the environment. It is already known that sunscreens are affecting the environment negatively. So for example, chemical sunscreens are causing huge problems for the coral reefs, but there is a suspicion that nanoparticles are going to cause problems for marine life. Regarding nanoparticles, going forward, I will try and use non-nanotechnology sunscreens, and that's what I would recommend to anybody asking. My reasons for that are, until now, I've not been anxious about it at all because I knew that the research said it doesn't penetrate the skin. That's what the current research says. But like I said, that is only in 24 to 48 hours. That's only a short-term study. So I would be concerned about using something with nanoparticles every day, all year round, as I do, without knowing what the effect of that was. Add to that the fact that they don't know how it affects the processes of the skin. Add to that they don't know how it affects the environment, that it hasn't been tested on sunburnt skin. All of these things, I would just like to see more solid research before I use it as an everyday product. I'm not anxious about having potentially used nanoparticles for, could be 10 years, because it's been about 10 years that nanoparticles have been used in sunscreens or in mineral sunscreens, so zinc and titanium dioxide. They use it, by the way, so that there's no white cast. That's the reason it's used. But I'm not nervous about that because I have used a lot of chemical sunscreens, and that's actually more concerning to me. And also, you know, what's done's done. You can't worry about what you've done. You can only move forward. So how do you find out if your sunscreen has nanoparticles in it, and which ones do I recommend? The first thing I would say is, regardless of nanoparticles or chemical or mineral, I would recommend that you don't use a spray sunscreen or a powder sunscreen, because there is good evidence showing that inhaling all sunscreens, all different types of sunscreens, but particularly nanoparticles and zinc and titanium dioxide, can cause damage in the lungs. So I would recommend to not use powders and sprays, because they are the biggest, they give the biggest chance of you inhaling the product. The second thing I would say is, if you're looking for non-nanotechnology, is you need to avoid the ones that say that they are transparent or that they are sheer, particularly untinted ones, because if they're tinted, they're generally not concerned about the white cast, and that's why they would use nanoparticles. And the other choice you have is to use chemical sunscreens, so completely stay away from zinc and titanium dioxide. But chemical sunscreens have their own concerns. For example, oxybenzone, there is a concern that that causes hormone disruption. There's still research ongoing. It's one of those very controversial things. But aside from the potential effect on hormones and how cancer causing it may or may not be in all the other chemical sunscreens, it's known that chemical sunscreens are causing problems for coral reefs and the environment. So there's another reason to stay away from chemical sunscreens as well. One thing I would say here though is, don't be tempted to just go, you know what, I'm not going to bother using sunscreen, because they have actually done studies that show that using sunscreens prolongs life, even with all of the risks associated with the different type of sunscreens. There is a lesser risk of you getting cancer by using a sunscreen. So there's a lesser risk from the chemicals, the nanoparticles, etc., than there is from not using a sunscreen and being exposed to UV light. So don't use sprays or powders. Don't use anything that claims to be invisible or sheer or transparent. And then thirdly, I can give you a list created by the EWG, which lists 25,000 products, and you can have a look and see if your product is on there, and they tell you whether or not they use nanoparticles. Looking at companies, it's really difficult to find out. There isn't really a simple way for you to find out whether or not your sunscreen has nanoparticles in it. You can't just look at the back of the sunscreen and find out, because it will just say zinc or titanium dioxide. It won't tell you if they are nanoparticles. And there are some companies that are refusing to say whether they use it or not, which in my mind would mean they probably do. And there are actually only a couple, I've got 3 to tell you about, that actually do have a policy on nanoparticles, if you like. What I should also tell you is that there is a definition of nanoparticles created by the EU, but there isn't by the FDA. The FDA have refused to give a definition because it is so difficult to do so. The EU have said that anything less than 100 nanometers is considered a nanoparticle. It's a little bit more complex than that. There has to be more than 50% of those nanoparticles, etc. That can be misleading. For example, if you look up the list that I leave you from EWG, you'll see that a lot of companies use something called Fullerenes, and Fullerenes are actually something that is encapsulating nanoparticles. There's a lot of research going on where they know that damage is caused. They're looking at, can they encapsulate something and use it as a carrier so that it won't cause damage. There's a lot of nanoparticles that are coated in silicone, which is believed to stop it sticking to cells and causing damage. So yeah, there's a lot of confusion out there at the moment, but the EU has said anything over 100 nanometers is non-nano. The 3 companies that confirm they don't use nanoparticles are Deciem, Andalou Naturals and Badger Balms. Well, when I say the 3 companies, that's the 3 companies for the UK. There are a couple of others in the USA, but those 3 for the UK. So I've got some sunscreens here that I'm going to show you and talk about as to whether or not they seem to be or are nanoparticle free. The first one is by Angelou, and I've showed you this one before. It's the Andalou Naturals Beauty Balm SPF 30. This says sheer tint. So because it's tinted, that would kind of give me a clue that they probably don't need to use nanoparticles in here, because like I said, the whole reason is to avoid a white cast. But if you look up the description of this, it confirms that it's nanoparticle free. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Deciem. They have the Ordinary SPF, well, all of the SPF mineral sunscreens, and they also have the Survival range by NIOD. So Survival 0, Survival 10, Survival 20 and 30. I have ordered the Ordinary SPF 30 mineral sunscreen and also Survival 30 because they're both products I've used before. They're both products I really enjoy, and so I'm going to compare the 2 and see which one would be my preferred one, because the Ordinary one leaves my skin a bit dry, so I need to use something underneath it. I can't remember about the Survival 30 one, so I've ordered those 2. So you've got Andalou Naturals, Deciem, both NIOD and the Ordinary, because Deciem as a company do not use nanoparticles. And the third one is Badger Balm. I've heard of Badger Balm but never tried any of their products, so I have also ordered a Badger Balm SPF from, I think I ordered it from Amazon. I'll link them for you. They have a great discussion on nanoparticles and really clear details of what is in their products, which I think is wonderful. I really don't like it when companies are, you know, secretive and won't tell you, for example, the amount of retinol in their product, or they won't tell you whether they use nanoparticles or not. To me, that is just, it's sort of trickery, you know, it's not being open and honest with your customers. And so the Badger Balm website is great, and it talks about the fact that they've got a non-nano sunscreen. And they've also got something that they call a clear zinc. And they say that actually the product doesn't have any nanoparticles in it because the particles have all grouped together, but they don't feel they can call that non-nano. It's all very well explained, so I'll link that for you. But I've ordered a badger balm as well to test them out. So I will come back to you and do a comparison of the Ordinary, the NIOD, the badger balm, and then this Andalou one, because I have a small issue with this, that it has a lot of orange fragrance in it, which could be irritating. I tried to find out about this, the Dr. Jart Bb Cream. There's nothing from Dr. Jart saying whether they use nanoparticles or not. The fact that this is tinted would make me feel that this probably doesn't use nanotechnology, and so this is quite a full tube, and I am going to use this up. You know, I'm not going to chuck it out. Another one you may have heard me talk about is this. This is the Mountain Sun Protection SPF 50. I can't find anything about whether they use nanoparticles, but I would suspect they do because it's an SPF 50, and this is what it looks like when you rub it in. It's really transparent and it's very, very high. So for that SPF 50 to be transparent, I would suspect this has nanoparticles. So I probably wouldn't repurchase that. Another one is the SkinCeuticals. SkinCeuticals are a company that I found out that won't talk about whether they use nanoparticles or not, which, like I said, I don't find that acceptable really. So this is their SPF 50, I think, or 45. SPF 50. So you think it's going to have a bit of a white cast, but then when you rub it in, it really doesn't. And this is called Sheer Mineral Defense. And so again, I think this probably does have nanotechnology in it, and because they won't say, that makes me not want to repurchase this, you know. So I will use this up, but it won't be a repurchase for me. And the final one I've got here is the Simple SPF 30. This is a chemical sunscreen, so unlikely that it has nanoparticles in it, but it is based on, I think this is octocrylene, and that's one that has its own risks. So again, I will use this up, but not repurchase. So the only one I have that I'm kind of happy to use is this one, and I don't have an awful lot left. And this one, like I said, does have a lot of orange fragrance in it. So I will use, as soon as I get my Deciem ones and the Badger Balm, I will trial them all. I have used the NIOD Survival 30 and the Ordinary one. I just want to see if the Survival 30 is okay without me using another moisturizer underneath it or oil, you know, if it's hydrating enough on its own. And I will then come and do a specific, these are non-nano sunscreens, and these are the ones that I recommend for different skin types, etc. So I hope that that was interesting. I know that I was perhaps it felt like I was all over the place regarding evidence, etc. But that is the situation with nanoparticles at the moment. They're, depending on which study you read, you could come to a different conclusion. You know, you need to read study after study after study to get a bit of a balanced view. And I expected to only find a few studies, but there are a lot of studies out there. And I can see why companies are saying, you know, currently, Paula's Choice have put that the current research shows that they do not penetrate the skin, therefore we're happy to use them. That is true, but hopefully you'll see from what I said that it's perhaps a little bit naive. And it depends on the type of person you are as well, whether you're a risk taker or not, because, you know, honestly, as I said at the beginning, nanotechnology or nanoparticles are in everything. So we can't 100% protect ourselves, and there's risks everywhere in life, isn't there? So you need to have a bit of a balanced view. Anyway, hopefully that was useful. If you know any others, or if you know anything else about other companies that are talking about their nanoparticle policy, then please let me know, because there'll be more coming out even from the moment I film this. It's such a hot topic. I think there'll be more news. And if you are using a product that isn't listed on the EWG list, or one that I've mentioned, I would encourage you to email or phone the company and ask them, because the more people that ask a company, the more likely they are to put the information on their website so that they don't have to keep asking questions. That's everything. Let me tell you about my makeup. This is the It Cosmetics CC Cream in Light. It's a mixture of the illuminating and the original one. I can't find out, by the way, if It Cosmetics are using nanoparticles. I can't find out if the Inky List are using nanoparticles. It's just a lot of them, there's just no comment on it. Anyway, It CC Cream on my eyes is a pigment called Enchanted. No, French. I think it might be called French manicure, but that doesn't make sense, does it? You know what? I'll write it in the description for you, but it's a pigment by Makeup Addiction Cosmetics. Oh my goodness, I'm useless. I'm so sorry. I'll write it in the description. My blush is Clinique Blushing Blush in Innocent Peach. On my lips, I have got the Too Faced liquid lipstick in Sugar Cookie. That's everything makeup wise. These earrings are from H&M. This blouse was from Morrison's, would you believe? And I think that's everything. That's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon.